Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. Um, in case you didn't listen to the first video of my conversation with Hue Woodson, uh, Hugh has got a ton of degrees, and he's written a ton of poetry books, books on theology and philosophy. He's quite prolific. And I really got the sense in talking with him, and I met him after reading one of his books, his Heideggerian theological, I would say, investigations. Uh, I reached out to him after I read the book because I was quite impressed with his thoughts and the unique view that he had on things, and to me spoke very directly to the notion of the meaning crisis and in our particular time. So I reached out to him, and he's so friendly and so open to talking, and I really got the sense of the source from which he writes, right, is really not one of trying to figure something out or find out any kind of final conclusion around anything or defend anything, but rather like he's really an artist. And you can really feel that in this conversation. The first video was a lot about getting to know him and his views and where, why he's interested in the things that he's interested in. And then he had some technical difficulties and the video cut off. And then he came back on, and then I forgot to press the record button for about the first 10 minutes. So this video picks up from the point where I pressed the record button. My ventures in becoming a host, I guess, of some kind. So just so you know, this is that first 10 minutes is we were, for the most part, just really kind of getting into the process of thought itself and what thinking is, right, in the deeper sense of the word, and especially him being a Heideggerian scholar and a theologian, what the movement of thought and the way that Heidegger, opened up in his work, what that's done to him and what that's done historically, and what different theologians have taken that and integrated that into their theologies and what became possible with that. So this is where we start to get a little bit more into Dialogos, where I definitely was, light bulbs were going off for me, and I think for him too, in the conversation. And I think it's just the beginning, and I'm really glad that he's part of the conversation, the dialogue. Really enjoyed him, and I've enjoyed his spirit a lot. So thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the conversation.
Moving beyond these sort of terms and constantly circling back, trying to figure out a better way to say this word, a better way to articulate it. So then as he begins that book by going at Plato and the Sophist, by talking about we forgot what being is and the opening part of that book, he eventually starts going back to pre-Socratics and looking at Heraclitus and Parmenides and, and saying, wait a minute. So there's a listening to this that is always already a part of what I'm doing.
Yes.
So then I have to attune myself to that, because that's the only way I can know logos.
Yeah.
The only way I can know aletheia is by allowing myself to catch up with aletheia, realizing that tradition, metaphysics, humanism are things that are pulling me away from it, even though the idea was that these things were meant to make being human easier over time.
Yeah.
But it became easier, but it also hollowed out the human.
Yes.
To the extent that everything is too human.
Right.
To a certain extent. So then you want to get rid of that and then figure out how to empty things out, like do a self-empty, like in a Buddhist way or something. But self-emptying, so then you can be primed and attuned to this logos and be able to see things in a truer, sort of a unconcealed fashion. Because think for Heidegger, the world is full of concealment.
Yeah.
Language itself is a concealment.
Yeah.
So then you have to figure out, how can I say things or get to things in a way that reduces what naturally wants to conceal itself.
Yeah.
So they can be unconcealed and be ready for me to grasp with and be able to understand in a phenomenological way, like
right,
rooted into my, like you mentioned, the
yeah,
idea of the foreground, like the foreground, foreknowledge, all those things are there. You have to figure out, how do I get myself positioned so then I can really see that in a way that, and this is kind of what he mentions, like with Heraclitus. Heraclitus is already knowing this, like way back. Heraclitus, Parmenides, and Plato comes in and he just turns the table over and he just does something completely different.
right,
That's not being true to some of those early thinkers. That's why he goes back to them.
right. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sense of that. I think it's like, was it Nietzsche? I think first said he's like the philosopher. The philosopher doesn't just kind of like out of nothing think a new thought.
Yeah,
Whether
right.
or not he knows it or not, he actually is the one in the big philosophers are the ones that,
Mm-hmm.
like, this is where ontotheology comes from. I think,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Where they're able to think the emerging thought that,
Mm-hmm.
or the emergent or movement or change in the understanding of being, and they're able to like
Mm-hmm.
think it decisively, right? That's
right. Yeah.
like the onto, the innermost, right? And
Mm-hmm.
theo,
Right.
right? Theology.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're able to do it in a way that's tangible, that really means something.
yeah,
And this goes to like how you have certain people that love what Bart is doing, because Bart is not doing that. They
yeah,
want someone to stay true to, the scriptures, stay true to tradition, stay true to what all the doctors are trying to do at the level that they're doing it. But then you have Tillich and Bultmann and Rahner. They're saying, I can still talk about those things, those doctrines, Christology, and I can talk about soteriology, salvation, and sin, and all those things, but then root those in a way that is not
right.
concealed in the human understanding of it.
Yeah.
But then it's trying to pull out of it things that
What was conceived?
what was concealed. That's what they're more concerned with, and that's what Rahner ends up getting to at some point, which made him so huge. And because think about this, he's a Catholic thinker, and he's pretty much probably the only one maybe that is even doing this within that sort of camp.
Right.
And that sort of approach is looked at as being, well, you have a lane to be in, you have to stay in that lane. But then he's someone that says, well, I'm going to create a different lane that includes all these other lanes.
Right.
It's not inclusive, but it's something that's exclusive while being inclusive. It's doing two things at the same time, I think.
Totally.
Which I think Rahner is fascinating, because he wrote so many works in his career. I mean, if you ever seen, like, he has a huge volume of work. I mean, he wrote his entire life articles. His major book, of course, that is very Heidegger influenced, but very kind of Husserl influenced.
Yeah.
But he wanted to write about every single thing you could possibly think of in terms of theology. And he pretty much did, And so he is unsurpassed in terms of his body of work that way. And then Tillich, of course, wanted to create a real systematic theology that is using existence as the centerpiece, as almost as if it's like some sort of doctrine. In a way.
Yeah.
That becomes the thing that ties everything together.
Yeah.
And then Bultmann, of course, with language and tradition. And, Bultmann started off trying to figure out about synoptic tradition, the synoptic problem with the Gospels. But then he moves from there and says, well, maybe all these things are all mythology. And then maybe we have to figure out how to take the mythology out of it. So mythology then becomes something that conceals, so that we don't understand or can ever get to what Jesus really means.
Yeah.
Outside of that, so tradition and all these things have to be kind of stripped down, so then everything can come up in unconcealed fashion. So they're doing some things that are carving paths that are different, that would not have happened had it not been for Heidegger.
Yeah.
Heidegger, centerpiece of that, and I think some of them eventually tried to resist that over time. I think, or tried to kind of maybe kind of minimize it to a certain extent. I mean, Tillich writes only a couple of instances where he says, yeah, Heidegger, I read Heidegger and I know Heidegger.
Yeah, you really didn't talk about him a lot, right?
No, he doesn't. He keeps it to the away. Even Rahner's like, does other things, but everybody knows Rahner's dissertation was on Heidegger early on.
Yeah.
He kind of was making that later. So they figure Heidegger is toxic and they want to move away from it over time.
Right.
But it's inseparable from what they do, very inseparable.
When you talking about like listening, so just going back, I realized like when you came back on, I forgot to undo the pause button, so we missed a little bit of it. So I just wanted to be mindful of that. But one of the things you had talked about was this really caught my attention when you talked about your mentors, right? Your, or actually you called them your the people who apprenticed you, or what, like your mentors, right? And
I call them Dr. Botters now.
yeah,
I call them your Dr. Botters, both of them. Yeah.
And you said something like, in your conversations with them, what you were interested in, what you were asking questions about, really had them remember that they liked Heidegger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the one I mentioned, I talked to him on Thursdays. He's James Duke. He teaches at Bright Divinity School.
Yeah.
He's a church historian. He specializes in hermeneutics, and he specializes in Friedrich Schleiermacher, theologian.
Yeah.
And he and I had so many conversations when I was in grad school, and he started kind of thinking back to his early time, his early career, his early studies in Heidegger and German thinkers and German idealism, Hegel and all these people. And so it started awakening in him his early interest. And so eventually I was able to talk about Heidegger with him that he, would not have been able to do otherwise, I think. He mentions that. He of course, he wrote a blurb on the second book that I did for Theologian's Guide. And I think that he really helped me really hash out some of these interests, these sort of connection points I want to make with Heideggerian theology, by way of him remembering, because he often would tell me that, he said, Hugh, there's so much I know, I've basically forgotten so much that you reminded me of things that I didn't realize I actually already knew. And it kind of reawakened things for him, Yeah. And even my other mentor, David Gowans, who has since retired. He retired the year I finished my second master's in theology over at Bright.
Yeah.
He specialized in Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard was huge to Heidegger. I mean, it was a huge influence, but he doesn't mention it a whole lot, though. He keeps it kind of suppressed. Right. But I talked with Gowans a lot about Heidegger. That was something that we spent lots of time. We talk every Saturday now, and we talk about, different things I'm working on with whatever. And so we constantly come back to those things. And it's amazing how with both of them, they really are not, I mean, they definitely would say they're not Heideggerians. And I often kind of hesitate to call anybody a Heideggerian because that has a lot of connotations that are kind of tricky when you talk about Heideggerian.
I know Heidegger wouldn't call himself a Heideggerian.
He wouldn't even be a Heideggerian, right? I mean, perfect example. I mean, he wouldn't be a Heideggerian. But
you just say, thinking thinks paths.
Exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, the what I call the Heidegger speak. Like one might say that I'm doing this, but one might be wrong. That sort of stuff. But yeah, it's like he's not a Heideggerian, so I think it's kind of like you have a way of thinking that happens to be articulated by Heidegger in a way that you go to build what you're doing. So then you become someone that is in Heidegger studies, I think, is a good way of looking at it versus being Heideggerian. But then, of course, that term is controversial, and that's why I like to use it for the first book, because these are, I think Bultmann, Tillich, Rahner would never, ever want to be considered Heideggerians, but they come from a school of thought that is inseparable from Heidegger in a lot of ways.
Well, just even just the sense of what you were talking about, like that it occurred to Rahner going like, okay, you need to stay in this lane. He's like, all right, I'll go further. I'll create a whole new thing. Whatever it was that like that intelligibility that could have it even show up, the world show up like that, is that sense or that flavor of the awakening of thought. Right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And when I heard it, I was appreciating of this sense of just, it's interesting because one of the things that I've noticed as I've gotten older, I mean, definitely I was born in Chicago. Like I didn't have any kind of religious, like other than, you can't, other than the ways that you can't not be religious.
Yeah, right.
Like deep in our being. I mean, we're all Christians, in America.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course there's, there's this big umbrella that we all kind of have agreements on. And of course there's like the subtle things that are differences, but there are the things that there's more that combines us and brings us together and separates us.
Yeah. Sure. And a lot of the positive philosophers, the new atheists and stuff, they want to like take their sense of intellectual morality, right? and then they don't want to. It's like the hand. If the hand didn't understand, like,
Yeah.
didn't
Right.
account for the arm, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the arm, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
that thing for forgetfulness. But one of the things I've noticed, and I think I just got this in what you were saying and what you were describing, what opens up when Heidegger, you could say, kind of broke the traditions, right? Or broke open and used
Yeah.
terms, because that's what a lot of what he was doing, right? When
Yeah.
these
Terms. Yeah.
words and bringing things together, is he's trying to mix, like, break the traditional way of
Yeah.
where thought has become like lost its sense, its animating sense, right? And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that it wasn't like he was I never got this sense that he was rebelling. I always got this sense that actually he respected
Yeah.
the
I think so.
ability of the traditions probably more than anybody,
I
right?
think so. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. He understands that you have. I mean, you can't create a counter tradition without having a tradition to counter from. So I think he's very much aware of that. But then he looks at it as kind of a ladder that has to be kicked away. You can't depend on that completely.
Yeah.
And that doesn't advance the conversation if you're still working within these boundaries. You're kind of moving beyond a future projected thing, I think. And that was his big beef, I think, with metaphysics and eventually humanism, is that it's not doing enough to address the issue, which I think he had. That's the beef he had with Sartre. I mean, Sartre tried to, reorient things between, instead of essence over existence, existence precedes essence. And Heidegger was like, well, you're still working with metaphysics, you're still doing the same thing. It's not.
In fact, you're more
anything new.
You're more Cartesian than Descartes, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're not solving the problem. You're just perpetuating things.
Yeah.
So I think it's something to that. I think that is definitely. Now, I don't want to discount Sartre does some great things, but I mean, I think that's a good point that I think becomes part of this sort of wedge that Heidegger realizes when a lot of Sartre's students were then going back and were saying, well, if when Sartre wrote this text, existentialism and humanism, and then they say, well, Heidegger, are you doing humanism too? Because you seem like you're an existential thinker as well. Yeah. And so Heidegger's like, no. Let me write my letter on humanism and I'll show you that I'm not doing that. I'm doing something completely different.
Yeah.
Now, some might say it's an ego thing, he just doesn't want to be, gathered together that way. Right. But I think he's rebelling against this idea of what humanism is, which I think is, obviously a human-centered, anthropocentric view of the world where everything is logocentric to the human. He's trying to get beyond that. Yeah. So all his work, even being in time, I think, being in time, he's putting time on a level playing field with me. In a way that no one had done before. The temporality is important.
Right.
And man doesn't exist without time.
Yeah.
Time is something that becomes the framework that allows being to be in a lot of ways. So I think he's the tradition thing, I think for him is always tricky, because when you rebel against tradition, it's kind of like you have to do so in a way that is nuanced. Yeah. But then realizes that you wouldn't be able to do what you were doing had it not been for these thinkers and these people. I mean, Nietzsche is like the big person that he kind of starts with a lot of. Yeah. The last metaphysician of the, that sort of thing. And going back to other thinkers. I mean, those become people that I think for him speak to where Nietzsche ends and what needs to be done after Nietzsche. Yeah. So it's always just sort of after sort of post-Nietzsche sort of approach, which I think becomes the big wheelhouse that you see Agamben operate in and Derrida operating in. Derrida's doing the same exact thing. This idea of railing against traditions and figuring out how can I carve my way. Foucault, same thing. He's looking at knowledge and epistemology in a way that is nuanced. So they all are owed what they're doing to Heidegger, and Heidegger is the one that kind of opens up this floodgate, right? That no one had really thought about before. I think. I mean, Foucault, in a lot of ways is brilliant as a thinker, and he knew his Heidegger very well, those guys. Derrida knows it very well. Yeah. I mean, Derrida used and abused Heidegger in lots of ways, of course, but he knows it really well, though.
Like his work. I'm reading a work by him, Aporia, actually.
Yeah, good work.
He goes right in. I'm like, his later works, like, actually, he starts to bump up against where he can't deconstruct anymore. And then
exactly.
What's that, right?
Yeah.
And that there's something See, I think in many ways, this is where I could imagine like that, where I really get the sense of like Heidegger and theology, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, Heidegger never, and this is where the sense of where Heidegger kind of broke the tradition, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he
Yeah.
was, but he had his eye on, right, the thing
Right.
that there was that there was inside of the tradition was concealed the intelligibility of being.
Yeah.
And so, like,
Right. Exactly.
Open.
Exactly.
So you have Tillich, and they re-look at all the symbols, and then they draw out, right, the intelligibility that was concealed in its nearness of the church and all the traditions, right? And
Exactly.
reinvigorates it. And
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's kind of maybe where some of the postmodernism like kind
I
of
think so.
stray is they just took the breaking it, and
Yeah.
they didn't have the sense of the emergence of the new ground, of the new animating forces that made sense, right? And so like, and all that is part of a bigger movement. But this is the thing that which is really interesting, and I think you'd probably be interested in this, is that I think that we may be looking at, for the first time in like a long time, where, and this is what's interesting is technology makes this possible, where we're having this conversation, and there's people that are going to listen to the conversation and have conversations about this conversation, talking to Heidegger that never went to college.
Yeah, right? For sure. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, like, there's a movement of, one of the things that I think Peterson really revealed, right?
Yeah. Right.
Is that people actually have an attention span. Like they really do want to think about deep things, and they will think about them, like, and they'll really be into it, and it changes their lives, right?
Yeah, that Peterson and Zizek debate, I mean, that was like a hugely watched thing at the time. And who would have thought that that would be a big, like, Super Bowl level event? Right? Yeah, I mean, I watched, it was riveting. I was like, wow, I'm looking at, like, but of course it didn't play out like I thought it would, but I'm looking at, like, he talks. I'm like, okay, I'm looking, like, this is really like, because I love Zizek's work too. I mean, I've written about him multiple times. And he kind of is someone who is trying to make philosophy be more than just philosophy. Like, he's really using it in ways that can then speak to people. I mean, he writes books that are not necessarily for academics. They're for anybody that's interested in Hegel or Heidegger or, Lacan, or psychoanalysis. So he's really popularizing things. And of course, Peterson the same way. I mean, he's doing a lot for his field, but also becoming part of a pop culture of a public intellectual that we don't have as many of these days. They're out there talking, and people are coming to see them talk, and they are like the centerpieces of how thought advances and how thought begins. I mean, those guys are missed. I mean, used to be a time where, like, Heidegger would go on these interviews and he'd be interviewed for things. I mean, you don't see that too much anymore as you used to. It's not the same. But I think Peterson, I think, is I've had students that have come to me and they've asked me questions about Peterson and psychoanalysis and Marxism, for example. I think the other week a student asked me about Marxism from Peterson. I'm like, well, you might want to read Marx a little more carefully. I mean, I'm not saying Peterson is wrong, but I mean, that's a take, and there's multiple takes you can have of Marxism, and that's not the only take. And so once you go back to that, then you can get a better handle of what exactly he's talking about, and then see where you stand on it, which I think is important.
Right. I think my friend Chris, who you would really like a lot, what he says about Peterson, he says, I think more than a psychologist, more than like a cultural commentator, more than any of that stuff, he's a preacher.
I think that's a good way of looking. Yeah, definitely. He is. He sermonizes what he's saying in a lot of ways, and I think that it's just fascinating to watch. I mean, it's really.
And in many ways, he's revealing the need for fathership. That's gone, right?
He makes a lot of good sort of assessments that then I think open up conversations about things in ways that would never have happened before.
Right.
Which I think we need more of. I mean, the idea of having an intellectual is someone that is not necessarily how to think, but it's someone that just opens questions like Socrates does. I mean, Socrates tells Theaetetus, I'm not here to be someone to tell you what the answers are. I'm here to be a midwife,
right?
To get you on the path toward thinking, which I think is what we really need. I think in terms of intellectual progression out there. I think
It's funny as we're talking about this. I'm just getting a sense of this is what I think that people are starting to understand is that to really do philosophia, right? It's an act of courage.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
There's a dignity in the act of questioning, which is kind of badass, right?
For sure.
Level, because it's like you're opening up horror. You're opening up and you're questioning
exactly.
the awful and the awestruck and the wonder. But it's you got to confront. It's like
it's messy business, It's like really.
If you're not confronting things like beyond what you know, and that actually takes courage. So there's this kind of feedback, this autopoetic feedback loop of where it's really an adventurous thing.
Yeah.
I think that's the excitement, is just being at the edge of something. And there's something about us. There's something about Dasein, right? About that it is that I think that there's like I think both are important, but it seems like that there's one. Like I think everybody kind of knows this. It's probably just like the existential fact of our ontology, right? Is we always have this kind of background sense of pressure, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like this sense of like, the sense of being given a gift that I can't repay, but yet I'm thrown to feel a sense of guilt, like a deep sense of like my conscience is tuned into like, have I done enough? Have I become somebody, right? Like that can justify the fact of my existence that I can't account for, right? Like I'm burdened with that kind of gift, right? Pressure of like, right? Who am I gonna be? Right? Am I being someone, right? And of course, you can't say it because it's like you use your existence to do whatever it is that you do. So it's like it's like an unpayable debt, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
This other way, which is I think this other part, which is I think as I've gotten older and where there's this other part where there's this other way where like it's like you already are more than you can ever accomplish, right?
Sure. Yeah. Right.
There's this kind of way where just the fact of our particular kind of beingness, right? That it can actually bear witness, right?
Yeah.
To the fact of our existence, and we get to be the site of it, and we get to give testimony to it, and even what we think about it. Like there's this other part where it's like just it's almost like an ethics, a sense of ethics about, on some level, like I think this a lot of times. I'm like, what? How the hell? Why did the Big Bang grow a nervous system?
Oh, sure, right.
Like,
right.
That's one way you could talk about it. Like it's like there is this sense, like way in the background, that on some level I kind of feel like our whole thing is just to take a very finite, limited, but the first glimpse, as far as we know, that like all that is opened its eyes for like just a fraction of a second ago. There's that sensibility about like even more than saving the world and more than like making sure that we still exist and making sure that we're doing good, and
all those things are important too, of course, but
other deep part, which is like the wonder to it. Simple fact of our being here is just absolutely, you can't get underneath that mystery. It's and that's the thing that seems to be so near, and that's one of the things that these kinds of conversations bring alive to me.
Oh, sure.
And it's so encouraging. And I was wondering about what you think about this, because I think this sense of like where you have an insight, and the insight is usually reveals the ground of what you were already in, but it was concealed.
Right.
And there's something about that kind of insight, that this already alwaysness, that being prone to those kinds of things, I think seems to be so, I've noticed how encouraging it is. And it doesn't even have to be like a great, good news insight. It could be like something like, oh, I've been pretending, but like,
just some epiphany of some sort, something that, something that just kind of attunes you in some way that you hadn't been before, basically, something that calibrates you.
Yes, that realizes like, oh, being was right here the whole time. I've been looking for it, but like it was already here. And that already alwaysness, I feel like there's some kind of faith that I feel about that. There's like an in-touchness of like a trust of that's like an awakening of like, no, there's an intelligibility that doesn't need even my episteme, right?
Yeah, right.
It's bigger than I am, that I'm inside of it, I'm of it, and that I can recognize myself having it already got me on some level. There's something about that I think is a kind of faith that this can kind of awaken.
Yeah, and I think Heidegger for sure. I mean, I think he's definitely there and being in time. And I've often wondered if, there's a lot of debates on why he never finished being in time. Like what, and he gave his own reasons why he never finished it. But I think that it could be that either the path he was taking that book was to a point that he felt like he could no longer articulate it in any real way, because it was something that was had an alreadiness to it. It was something that was already there. So how are you going to articulate something in a way which language reduces and language confines, when something like that is beyond language, which I think is what he's up to.
Then he went like, what language? What is this thing called language?
Exactly. Well, what do I call this? What do I call this thing that I just came to? I have no idea, So that's probably what's up. And then you have a good handle of like what, this is what a lot of theologians, really turn to at Heidegger, because they see in him these theological underpinnings to his work. That's very obvious, even though he's never saying theology, he's never saying God, but it's something that's underneath it that is always speaking to things that exist in a way that make the human be what it is, but then it's something that requires us to think about it in a transcendent way. Like we have to think about it outside of the body in a certain way. And that's why, that's why he's never really, he's not concerned with the body that same way, I think, because he's more concerned with these transcendent things. So of course, Merleau-Ponty comes in and he tries to include the body, but that's his own take. But Heidegger's are concerned with what makes the body, and then what makes the thing that makes the body. He's concerned with the levels removed beyond that. The body is just the thrownness. What makes this thrownness happen? What makes this anxiety happen? What makes temporality happen? He's looking at that on a more deeper level.
Right.
Which speak to this idea. So what he does throughout his whole career, he's just circling. He's going back and back and forth. He's touching different pieces, and so you see a trajectory in his career where often some thinkers have said, well, there's a early Heidegger and a later Heidegger, that sort of thing, to say he's doing something different in later period versus early period. But I think he's doing the same thing. This is something that I've talked about with my mentors, other Heideggerians. It's like he's never taken his eye off the ball. Right. It's just that he's trying to figure out, how can I circle back and get another take at it that I didn't have before, and then once I learn some more, come back again at it again, and then include this thinker, go to Hegel's. His career, he's going through thinker to thinker to thinker to thinker, trying to figure out how to, say this better. And then of course you got the Nazism thing, which was a circling of tasks too. He was trying to figure out, how is this Führer principle going to be something that's going to help awaken this unconcealment? Or it's not. And when they come back around again, and he's just constantly going through these paths. So when he gets to the end of his career, he arrives at poetry and language, and and thinking is the big thing for him later on.
God, you know, it's so funny because it's like on some level, this is so, I think that people can just really relate to just that.
Yeah,
Not like the way we go through
yeah.
our lives. I think I'm doing X, Y, and Z because of this. But then
Yeah.
I actually kind of move towards it and I get to this and I realize the whole time what I really was doing was this. And so it changes my whole history, right? But that's constantly happening. This somehow it's bigger than us, but it moves through us and it constitutes us and it's ahead of us and behind us. But like it's the matter is never settled.
Yeah, exactly. It's constantly like he's constantly trying to settle those things, you know, and that's and I think that's why sometimes he's looked at as a, you know, I mean, some people that are detractors of Heidegger might say, oh, well, he's just a Frankenstein philosopher, is just putting pieces together. I mean, he's using Frege, he's using Dilthey and Husserl and these different people and putting them together, but he's trying to then hone in on something that they didn't hone in on. And yet he's using them as a stepping stool, but it becomes a stepping stool he pushes away at something. He's more concerned with how do I circle back and how do I keep figuring out this in a better way. And that's why he creates these words, you know, like Dasein is something that normally means existence, but it has a much more nuance. It has the idea of bareness going on. It has this idea of being in terms of lowercase b, uppercase b, and then this idea of a sign in the sense of having a sort of maybe a musicality to it, an aesthetic to it that I think is beneath that, which I think he's playing to too. So then all these things are kind of on the forefront of what he's doing. So then by the time he gets to the end of his career, when he starts looking at all the pre-Socratics, he's thinking that they are the ones that have already been doing this well before Plato. So now if I can go back to them, then I can figure out where we've gone wrong since Plato in a way that I didn't do it being in.
Yeah, what's the thought that Parmenides didn't that he didn't think? Right?
Yeah, what he missed,
new beginning, right? The other beginning, where it's like it kind of goes back and somehow in the atmosphere before that thought got crystallized, he kind of like, you know, and it could have gone this way, and he goes, all right, so let's replay all of history from there.
Go all the way back.
You get the sense of like, he has no idea where he's going to end up.
Yeah, he has no idea, but he's just thinking that this is my hunch.
And the musicality and the tonas of like, I think I'm really getting what you mean by the aesthetic, that it's like it's the beauty of it, it's the intelligibility of it. It's not the proposition, right? The propositions are just the weave, the fabric, right? But he's always just kind of right there. And that's the thing I thought one of the most interesting things is when I heard someone say that like Heidegger refused in his collected works, he refused to put an index.
Yeah, true.
I think that
says a lot.
It says a lot because it says what he's like. And that, sometimes people kind of write me and they'll ask me, what was Heidegger's view on da 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 da? And I was like, I don't think Heidegger had views. I
think for him, I mean, his directive for the collected works were that they be ways, not works.
Yes,
that's what he's concerned with. So he's concerned with that. So how are these ways of thinking that lead toward different paths and not about titles and works and things like that? So that's why you see them ordered in a way where he has like Being in Time is number 2, and then he's got like his early stuff number 1, and then everything he does after that are all like lectures and other things. And then you get to the very end where he's got journals and stuff like this and diary entries and things like that, where the journal entries are just him constantly retooling, constantly re-articulating, constantly retreading paths he's had before in order to get new thinking and new ways of approaching things. But he didn't want himself to be codified that way for sure.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
I think it's like when he talked about, like, people make fun of him a lot because he never says, I thought that, he says thinking.
Exactly, yeah.
But the thing about, like, he's actually, this is why there's something that being communicated in just that move, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's like almost like a practice of I think there's actually general semantics has this thing about the consciousness of abstraction where they're like, don't use is, and you have, it's this practice that forces you to distinguish map from territory, right? And and sure that territory is is like you're looking to the territory for that, right?
Yes,
so right. He's like embedded philosophical kind of practices that I think that he was constantly doing.
Mm-hmm. And that was a way to do it, to say that, instead of saying that I have a question that I want to ask, he said there's a question that wishes to be asked. So he talks about it in this like really abstract way, like the question is its own thing and its own entity.
Yeah.
That then begs to ask its own question and leaving the human out of it. So it's always this sort of a compartment. I mean, it's beautiful when you hear it, but it's kind of jarring for the first time. It was like, what is he saying? Why did I just say I asked the question? No, it's more to than that. He's trying to articulate in a way that is honing in on the question and not letting the question be superseded or be controlled by the I and the subject. Because subject-object distinctions are very important for him. He's trying to get beyond that, right? He's this Descartes problem that Descartes kind of pushes out in the world. He's kind of getting beyond that by saying that everything is its own entity and every entity has its own voice.
Yeah.
Its own sort of aesthetic, its own way of presenting its own being in the world within the temporality in which it exists, the context it exists in. Yeah, he's very much concerned with that.
Ability that like unconceals but conceals at the same time. Like that's the thing that I think I really kind of got.
There's attention,
with the notion of like where kind of like after being in time, I know he talked about like he wanted to develop a fundamental ontology, but I got this sense that he's like, wait a minute, there ain't nothing fundamental here. Like,
he moves away from that quickly.
Like, I think
he's like, this is not doing it. Because I'm still using ontology. And that's the problem. So I move away from that. So then he starts saying, well, let me look at it in terms of maybe we're talking about metaphysics. Maybe that's the problem. Well, I don't want to use that either because that's still rooted in ideas of what metaphysics are. And then, then we go to humanism. Then we go to aletheia, unconcealment. And that for him becomes more of a pure path. A pure reservoir that then does more heavy lifting than what he's done before, I think. In a very different way.
Just think about that. Just in your, like, I just imagine, just think about your own life, right? Like what it would take. You start this book, Being in Time. It's your dissertation. It's like your job. And as you're writing it, it writes itself beyond itself. And all of a sudden.
You can't complete it. You're like, I can't do this anymore.
What it must take. Follow the thing that he's actually listening to. Right. If that's not a metaphor, an example of the way that we could live our lives, like
I would say so.
Really allegiance to, like, because I think that's always the sense of like your identity is that kind of that can get, there's ways in which it crystallizes and it's good, and then there's other ways where it's like your attention needs to see something or something speaking to you. What it takes to listen to it really is to be someone who doesn't happen to be the person you've been.
Exactly.
That takes something to actually hear that.
It does. And once you hear it the way he hears it, he's like, well, I can't continue to write this book because now it's obsolete. It doesn't. And he says it. He's like, being in time, he says, never lived up to the task, is what he always says. It never reached its full fruition, whatever it is, because he realized as he wrote it that what I'm trying to articulate is never going to be encapsulated in this. It's just never going to get there, So he leaves. There's a whole half of it that he never wrote, And so he has lectures that people have often looked at as being ways to fill in what he left out of the book. But he's well beyond the book by the time we get to the, late 20s, early 30s. He's dealing with other things by then. He's concerned with truth, and he's concerned with, how to make National Socialism have a philosophical underpinning, then he realized, I'm being used by Hitler, so now I got to get away from that. So he has other issues that are at stake. And so Being in Time becomes one of the most interesting unfinished books of philosophy that's out there, I think. To have it be incomplete, and then like, well, what would he have done? What was his purpose? He doesn't write anything else about it anymore after. He has another book later on called Existence and Being, which I think is trying to talk about the problems with being in time, but he doesn't really try to go any further than that, I happen to have a copy of it right here, by the way.
Oh, right on.
It's always nearby. And I think, what did he say about something? I kind of go to it and I kind of, find a little piece there. So,
the
yeah.
I just always have this sense, like when I start thinking about like ecstatic time, right? And like
Yeah.
he talked about it right in the beginning of, right in the beginning of Being a Time, he talks about where, and I think he's breaking open Hegel, right? Hegel's complete. You can't, like everything fits into that thing, right?
Hegel was a systematic thinker.
Whatever that was, right?
Yeah. Hegel tries to categorize everything. That's like his big thing.
Well, it's like that's what happens when you put like actuality as the king. And Heidegger, he says right like in the first couple of pages, I think he talks about like, no, it's possibility is above actuality.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Right.
X like talks about like actually it's everything that's concealed that we can't have in hand that is drawing me to move in this direction. It's not that I moved this arm in some determined way. It's this. There's a space that drew it out, right? It's a
exactly.
with the world, and this sense of intelligibility is distributed and historical in fashion. Every single thing that we do, right? Every single thing is animated in historicalness, and this is like. And I'm curious because you teach a lot, right?
Yes.
And you teach. Do you teach college and and high school or?
Well, I teach dual credit classes now. So I taught high school only a few years ago, and then now I've been teaching only college. So I'll go to high school campuses and teach 2 classes.
Right. Okay.
Gotcha. But they're all college courses. So I mean, I'm teaching Plato and I'm teaching like Aristotle and Descartes, Husserl to high school kids, and then I come to campus and I'm teaching the same thing here with Shakespeare and other things.
Right. Yeah. I'm just curious from your perspective, right? When you're working, because I can imagine that, like, and I heard it in the way that you talked about with your mentors, that like so much of this is awakened through your interest, your mentors, that it's, and I can feel that sense of the livingness of the Dialogos, right? That
exactly.
Proper. Right. You're not trying to like get clear on propositions, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Like, whoa, like let's get closer to this mystery, right?
That's something students have a lot of problems with, I think, because when you read these philosophers, they want to know what's the answer, like what's the neatly packaged way of understanding what Kierkegaard means or Schopenhauer means. And I'm like, well, that's not the point, really. The point is like, what path are they opening up for you? And then how you take that path opens up another way of thought. They just become just path openers that they kind of begin it, but they aren't the end of it. And then now you can disagree with them too. You don't have to think that Aristotle's correct. He could be wrong. He's right in a time that is removed from our time, and so that doesn't mean that he's correct. He could be missing something. So they have an issue with trying to actually counter these thinkers in a way that brings what they think to the fold in a more fundamental way, I think. They have an issue with that sometimes. So I've taught Heidegger lots of times with them too, and then Heidegger, I think they get just perplexed by the language, I think, and that throws them off. I'm like, well, don't worry about the language. Just look at what words do you know, and then how is he using these words in a way that are different from what you would use them, and then what that means, and then go from there. I mean, you know what time is, you know what being means. So why is he tying those together that way, and then what is at stake? What sort of impact does that have on how we look at these two words now? I think that gives more insight to them that way.
Totally. It's a trick, because I've noticed like to in teaching and to wait. First of all, you just don't have any control. Like I've just noticed that, like awaken stuff, you have about a half breath notice. Like there's no method. There's no. I think there's methods, but like there's this kind of wild thing about people's freedom. But I think one of the things that I think with social media, it's almost impossible to comprehend to what degree we are shaped by it, right? And
true.
I would imagine it's just it's it's only been 15 years that
very new,
right, but we're now having kids that don't have a memory before the internet, and so what they call real, right, are completely different. And it's just happened, and there's no way to understand it. But it's fascinating. Like these technological structures aren't just like, as Heidegger talked about, they're not just the gadgets, but they're that there's an understanding of being, right, as a state of reserve, right? Optimization. So it's more like, it's like almost like I get the sense that our time and technology and the dominance of it kind of figurizes all ground, right? It's just it just, the moment there's background, it figurizes, and then it does it in this way that doesn't at all point to the background.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's true.
That background, and seeing that, it's interesting because it's like this sense, especially with philosophy at this level, to spend time at something that's difficult, right? That isn't immediately useful. Right. It's just almost to the point where I think it's almost to the point where I think kids probably can't even perceive.
Their minds are just not able to think in a really abstract way like that, because they haven't, I guess that muscle just isn't there. It's just not. It's prefigured and then it's transfigured. So it's like prefigured and then like all the work is done. So then they don't have to do anything. Their reality is given to them versus constructing your own reality based on what you encounter. They just don't have that. So when they read like Aristotle or Plato, they're like, well, what is he saying?
Like, don't
they? He's saying
there's an app. Can't you just like?
It's like
optimize.
There's no right or wrong answer. I'm like, I said, well, one student asked me, well, how many different ways can you interpret Aristotle? I'm looking like, well, I mean, any number of ways, depending upon what you bring to the table when you read it. But you understand the language. So it could be millions of different ways. There's not one way. I said, so you have to figure out what way speaks to you based on what you know, and then be able to get something from this that's meaningful, And so I think, even when I say that, some students, I mean, you can tell me they're sweating. I mean, you see the smoke coming off their heads. I mean, this is like really heavy lifting when we think about like, read this text and then tell me what you think of it. I'm just going to sit back and I'm just going to give you some, brief kind of framing of this is Plato, this is Aristotle, and kind of base stuff. But then you have to do all the work. That stuff is like really taxing for them to do that, to really think that. And I guess I know you can think of this too. You can speak to this as well. But it's like, when I was growing up, I was reading all these other thinkers. Looking at Leonardo da Vinci's work and Michelangelo's work, and it's like, I did all it on my own. I didn't have anybody tell me like, hey, this is what he thinks. This is the Pietà. This is like, I just looked at it on my own and, and figured out on my own. And then it became a more organic experience than one that is packaged and, prefigured and that sort of thing. That I think these students nowadays don't have, whatever. They just don't have it, And then the attention span is a whole different thing. Like their attention span is really short. So you're looking for sound bites. You're looking for things that are easily digestible, which I think if you're going to read Heidegger, you're not going to get him in just, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes. You have to read. I mean, I know people that have read Being in Time, I bet I wouldn't be proud of hundreds of times. They get something different every time. You have to put in the work with a lot of that stuff, really.
And that's the thing. It's like, like, that's the thing that's a little scary.
Yes.
Right? And it's the challenge of like, it's like, I mean, human beings will go through anything if they can see a good enough reason to do it. Right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right.
Jesus Christ. Like people go through some enormous amount of pain voluntarily if it's meaningful enough. However, I'm just afraid that there's something about the way phones and this way of collapsing all distances, right?
Yes, right. Yeah.
It's kind of weird paradox where when you like it, so what I do sometimes is like if I want to really get a kick and a rise out of people is on my iPad I'll handwrite an email to somebody.
Oh, okay.
And people are like, what are you doing to me? Right? Like what it does is it really introduces this sense of like this difference between technology and a to read my handwriting is to actually be to have some distance between you and it, and that distance and overcoming that distance is a process and a ride, and it involves a kind of participation. The ability to even see that is an option, like that's even like something that you could even do. Removing so many of those things that are innately scary, and it's becoming less and like optional. Like you don't even have to talk to anybody anymore.
Exactly. Yes. I mean,
internet connection, a computer, and you can become a millionaire. You can become famous. You can start a company, and you don't have to ever talk to another person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just the personal is gone out of a lot of that. It's just gone. I mean, people are just it's the technology. Even like students that don't even know how to read cursive anymore. Really, it's like they can't read it. And it used to be where that was the staple of early education, which was know how to write in cursive. They just don't have that.
Right.
Right. And then, like I mentioned, like having things kind of packaged where they understand it right away. They just things have been so prefigured that everything is prefabbed, and everything is just there for you already, and there's nothing really they have to do. Right. And because I taught AP English in high school as well, and AP is one of these things where like it's all about building thought and building original ways of looking at the world. But then even AP itself, I mean, you have to teach to a test, and the test then prefigures them again into something. So I'm always saying, well, let me give you some skills here that are more than just a test, but skills that then lets you have access to college in a way that you can think on your own and be able to question on your own in a way that means something, which I think a lot of them, it was hard. I mean, for students like that, if you haven't done that in a while, I mean, it's like running a marathon when you haven't even run a step yet. It's been a step. It's very difficult, but it's necessary, And students will ask me, I want to go to grad school. I want to do this. Well, if you go to grad school, I mean, you have to really, put in some work. You have to really do some things. It's not going to be ready-made. You have to actually read some books and learn some things. And they don't want to read anything. They want to just get it. Find Wikipedia and look it up that way.
Totally.
Which is sad.
So it's like not even see. It's one thing to like know that if I did the hard thing, it would probably be good for me and not be motivated.
Exactly.
There's one thing to reckon, like we all, I mean, like I do that every day, right? But like it's a totally different universe though, when it doesn't even occur to me that there's any good that can come out of difficulty.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Like that is like I'm watching it. It's like it's like if I'm hearing it, it's like that's a vanishing horizon, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And that's a different world, right?
That is a different way of thinking. Yeah, that's different. Yeah. To say that
it's not like, oh, that's gonna be hard and I don't want to do it, but I know if I could and I feel guilty of it. It's more like it's not even, it's totally concealed.
What's the easy way out?
This is where it's like Heidegger, I think, was really eerily right on the money, because he's like saying like the thing about this age is that what's concealed is concealment.
Yes, right.
Concealed.
The concealedness
doesn't reveal that it's concealed. Instead, the only thing that we call real are things that we can organize, position, optimize, extract, and collapse distances. And now, like, just look at just in the last couple of years, it used to, like a few years ago, it would have been weird to like think about your body and hack it.
Yeah, right.
Right? Now, like, it's like the most popular way of thinking about things. And it's really interesting, like that it's happened so quickly, and no one's walking around really going, God, this is really uncanny. It's strange. But because it's there, there's that kind of quality where the strangeness becomes the lack of homeness becomes completely concealed, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of concealment that's happening in a way that you don't realize it's concealed. Like it's just constantly happening.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that you're actually at a disadvantage at every step versus being it's kind of like it's almost like a false sense of unconcealment. Like it's a concealed unconcealment. Like it seems like it's really there, but really it's a distance that's giving between what we actually are having access to. We think we're having access to.
Right.
I mean, even with social media, it's like, well, I've got all my friends here and I've got everybody I can talk to from all around the world, but like, there's nothing really actual about any of it. It's all based on manufactured understandings of unconcealment.
Yeah.
It's not anything really there beyond. I mean, like I have I know students that have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Facebook friends, and they're all in other parts of the world. And never met them, don't know anything. I'm like, well, how are they really your friends? I mean, it's like what does the word friend mean if it means that you don't know these people and they live in another part of the world?
Right.
And you don't even know if they're really who they are. They could be a manufactured existence of something,
They're instant. There's no
process. You don't know. You don't really know. So all these friends are just it's just something that's very, I mean, it's tricky. So friendship that way means something different now than it did. When I was growing up, I mean, it's like you saw the person in real life and you were friends with them in real life. Right in front of you.
You had to deal with the otherness and the awkwardness and the terrifyingness, but there wasn't any other choice.
That's all you had, really. That was it.
It's always been terrifying, but if you have a choice, your nervous system isn't going to go, oh, why would I call somebody when I can just text them? Like,
exactly right.
All that otherness, right? Like,
exactly.
When you think about it, that otherness is how we come to realize that we are, right?
Right.
That relationality, which I think that there's something about that is the thing that, like, I feel pretty motivated to just keep looking at, right?
Right.
The sense of philosophia is on one level, it is you can go into these abstractions, but it reveals the thing that's most near. And I think it happens through relationship and conversation, right? And kind of allowing people to start to touch in on it. This is what I like, is that these kinds of conversations, just listening to them, right? That's why I like hearing this all the time where, like, oh, I listened to this conversation and I didn't even realize, like, it just opened up this whole world, right? And talk about this whole thing, and all of a sudden they're engaged in a dialogue, because I think it's very much like our lives. It's very easy to, well, I don't know if it's easy, but you can look at a dialogue is like, you can look at your relationship to the world as a conversation, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would say so. It's this constant sort of a linguistic interpolation of each other. Like you're constantly like interpolating language, and then you become the subject and object of language.
Yes.
And then language becomes something that then compartmentalizes, and you converse, and it's all about the back and forth of it.
Right. Well, it's getting dark. I have to.
It is getting dark over there.
We've been talking for a long time. I have to start getting ready for my wife to come home. Speaking of,
there you go. I have to go home myself. So.
This has been really. I really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation. This has been really a joy.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely love to talk to you again.
Yeah, let's do
other stuff, and maybe collaborate on stuff, here or there.
Yeah, and just I wanted to just, and I also wanted to, one of the reasons why I brought you on is because I just wanted to kind of also connect you to a sense of all of this conversation is really it's gathering, and there's something here, right? I mean, there's something.
No, I think you got it. Yeah. I mean the gathering is, I think, essential to figuring out all the questions that I think we've looked at in terms of what does it mean to the gathering. I think makes a distinction between philosophy and philosophia. Right. I mean, Hegel's gathering things, but I mean that becomes philosophy. It's not philosophia.
Right.
Which I think Heidegger then gets a hold of. It's like, well, he focused on the phenomenon of the spirit as being kind of the way he accesses Hegel, but then Hegel then is something that is too philosophy, is too rooted in tradition.
Yeah.
Even though tradition, there's nothing wrong with that, but then we can't be so locked in that to where we lose the interpersonal, the sort of unconcealment that's there that we need to get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right on. Great talking with you, my friend.
Yeah, great talking to you. A lot of fun.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're thinking about starting your own podcast, or you're doing your own videos.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I've been thinking about it for a while now. I wouldn't
Yeah,
mind doing it. Yeah,
yeah,
and then I think probably maybe I could lean on you for
oh yeah,
some advice or some sort of tricks
totally.
of the trade and tools, because I know you've been doing it for a while
Yeah,
and you kind of know how those things go. So,
yeah. Just
yeah.
since like last August. But the I would say that what I think what you got your eye on, what's been calling
Hmm.
you to write, right, in the philosophy and the poetry and that
Hmm.
there's I think you got a beat on I think you got the beat on the center of this thing that's actually becoming more and more necessary to get close to and distinguish,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
And
Right.
I felt that in your writing, and this is why
Yeah.
I got a hold of you, because it just seems
Hmm.
like what your natural interest in is speaking directly to the meaning crisis